Projection, how people make you their emotional dumping ground. You're having a conversation with someone, and suddenly you're being accused of something that makes no sense. They're angry at you for a trait you don't have, a behavior you didn't do, a motive you never had. You try to explain. You try to defend yourself, but your defense only seems to make them more certain. The more you deny it, the more convinced they become. And you start to feel crazy because their version of you has nothing to do with your actual experience of yourself. Welcome to projection. Projection is one of the most destabilizing psychological experiences you can have because the person doing it genuinely believes what they're saying. They're not consciously manipulating you. They're not lying. They have actually convinced themselves that what they can't accept in themselves exists in you instead. You become the screen onto which they project everything they can't acknowledge about themselves. And you're left trying to defend against accusations that have nothing to do with you and everything to do with their internal conflict. Here's how projection works at the psychological level. Someone has a trait, feeling, or desire they can't accept. Maybe it's anger, weakness, envy, selfishness, attraction to someone they shouldn't be attracted to, or fear. Whatever it is, acknowledging it would threaten their self-image. I'm not that kind of person is a core belief, and this trait contradicts it. The mind has to do something with this unacceptable content. It can't just disappear. So instead of looking inward and admitting this is mine, the mind projects it outward. I don't feel that. You feel that. And here's the crucial part. They genuinely believe it. This isn't a conscious strategy. It's an unconscious defense mechanism. They've actually convinced themselves the trait lives in you, not them. They can see it clearly in your behavior. They have evidence. They might even recruit other people to validate their perception. The projection process happens in steps, all of them unconscious. Step 1, disown the trait. I'm not jealous. I'm not weak. I'm not selfish. The trait is unacceptable, so it must not be part of them. Step 2, locate it externally. The mind finds the trait in someone else, usually someone close enough to trigger the internal conflict. You're jealous. You're weak. You're selfish. Step 3, react to it in you. Now that they've located the trait externally, they can express all their feelings about it without threatening their self-image. They criticize you, attack you, distance themselves from you. They feel righteous doing it because they're responding to your flaw, not their own. Step 4, feel solved. The internal discomfort reduces immediately. They've dealt with the unacceptable trait by making it your problem instead of theirs. Their self-image remains intact. The tension dissolves. This mechanism works because it reduces internal discomfort instantly. The moment they make it about you, they stop feeling the conflict. They've preserved their self-image. They've created an external target for an internal problem. And they can even recruit others to agree with them about how you are, which further validates the projection and makes it feel true. The most common projections follow predictable patterns. The cheater accuses you of cheating. They're either already cheating or thinking about it, and that desire threatens their self-image as a loyal partner. So they become hyper-vigilant about your behavior, suspicious of your friendships, convinced you're the one who can't be trusted. Their guilt gets transformed into your guilt. The liar calls you untrustworthy. They know they're dishonest, but they can't admit it. So they start questioning everything you say, pointing out minor inconsistencies, suggesting you're hiding things. Their dishonesty becomes your dishonesty in their mind. The controlling person says you're controlling. They can't acknowledge their need to dominate every situation, so when you set a boundary or make a choice they don't like, suddenly you're the controlling one. You're being rigid. You're not compromising. You're trying to run everything. The person who abandoned you says you're clingy. They can't acknowledge their pattern of abandonment or their fear of intimacy, so your normal need for connection gets framed as neediness. Your desire for presence becomes evidence of your dysfunction. The coward calls you weak. They can't face their own fear, so when you're vulnerable or admit uncertainty, they attack it in you. Your honesty about struggle becomes proof of your inadequacy because they need you to carry the weakness they won't acknowledge in themselves. The envious person says you're arrogant. They can't admit they want what you have, so they reframe your success or confidence as arrogance. You're not accomplished. You're showing off. You're not confident. You're full of yourself. Their envy becomes your character flaw. So how do you recognize when you're dealing with projection instead of legitimate feedback? The intensity is disproportionate to the situation. Their reaction is too big for what actually happened. They're enraged about something minor. They're devastated by something trivial. The emotion doesn't match the trigger because the emotion isn't actually about the trigger. It's about their internal conflict. The accusation is consistent despite evidence otherwise. They accuse you of the same thing repeatedly, and no amount of evidence to the contrary changes their mind. You show them you're not doing what they say you're doing. They acknowledge the evidence and still believe their narrative. Because the narrative isn't based on your behavior. It's based on their need to project. You feel confused. Their version of you doesn't match your experience of yourself. You find yourself defending against things you didn't do, explaining motives you didn't have, trying to prove you're not something you've never been. And the more you defend, the more confused you become because you're arguing against a fiction. They have the trait they're accusing you of. This is often extremely obvious to everyone except them. The hypocrisy is blatant. They do exactly what they accuse you of doing, often in the same conversation. But they can't see it because seeing it would mean acknowledging the trait in themselves. Here's the trap you fall into with projection. You try to prove you're not what they say you are. This seems logical. They're wrong about you, so you'll just explain reality and they'll understand. But your defense makes you look defensive. And defensive people are often guilty, right? So now your attempt to clear things up becomes evidence in their mind that they're right about you. If you weren't X, you wouldn't be so defensive about being called X. You get tangled in their narrative. You start questioning yourself. Maybe you are too sensitive. Maybe you are controlling. Maybe you are jealous. Their conviction is so strong, their certainty so complete, that you begin to doubt your own reality. Other people might believe them. Projection is convincing because the person doing it is convinced. They're not performing or exaggerating. They genuinely see what they say they see. So when they tell others about you, they're persuasive. And if those others don't know you well, they might believe the projection. This is why projection makes you feel crazy. They're absolutely certain of something that isn't true. You can't logic them out of it because it's not based on logic. It's based on unconscious defense. You can't show them evidence because they'll reinterpret the evidence to fit their narrative. You can't get them to see their own behavior because that's the exact thing their psyche is defending against. Meanwhile, you're standing there trying to defend your reality against someone else's delusion, and the effort is exhausting. So what do you actually do when you're on the receiving end of projection? First, recognize it. Notice when the accusation reflects the accuser more than it reflects you. Check with trusted people who know you well for a reality test. Ask, am I actually like this, or is this about them? Don't internalize their projection just because they're certain about it. Second, don't defend. This is counterintuitive, but crucial. Defense feeds the projection. Every time you say, I'm not X, they hear X people always deny it. Your defense becomes proof of the trait in their mind. Instead, state your reality once. Just once. That's not my experience of what happened, or I don't see myself that way, or I disagree with your interpretation. Then stop. Don't keep explaining. Don't keep proving. One clear statement, then disengage from the circular argument. Third, set boundaries. Projection often escalates. They become more insistent. They bring up past incidents and reinterpret them through the lens of projection. They recruit others to validate their perception. You have to cut this off. I'm not discussing this again is a complete sentence, and then you actually don't discuss it again. If the projection is chronic, limit contact. You can't fix someone's unconscious defense mechanism by being around them more. You can't prove your way out of their projection. All you can do is protect yourself from the ongoing accusation and confusion. Fourth, understand the function. They need you to be this thing to avoid self-knowledge. Your actual well-being isn't the priority. Their psychological equilibrium is. This isn't about you being better or proving yourself or earning their trust. This is about their internal conflict that they've externalized onto you. You can have compassion for this from a distance. Projection is suffering. They're so unable to face something in themselves that they have to make it your problem. That's painful. But compassion doesn't mean participation. You can understand their process without subjecting yourself to it. Projection becomes particularly dangerous in certain contexts. In the workplace, they sabotage you to management. They project incompetence or untrustworthiness or laziness onto you, and they report this to people who have power over your career. Now, you're not just defending your reality in a personal relationship. You're defending your livelihood against someone else's unconscious process. In intimate relationships, projection erodes your sense of self. When someone who's supposed to know you well insists you're something you're not, when they consistently misinterpret your motives and misrepresent your character, you start to lose your grip on your own identity. Maybe they're right. Maybe you don't know yourself as well as you think. This is crazy making. In family systems, projection becomes scapegoating. One person carries all the family's disowned traits. They're the identified problem, the black sheep, the difficult one. Meanwhile, everyone else maintains their self-image by projecting their dysfunction onto the scapegoat. This can last decades and damage the scapegoated person's entire development. When there's a power differential, projection becomes abuse. If your boss is projecting, if your parent is projecting, if someone who has authority over you is projecting, you can't just disengage. You're trapped in a situation where someone with power over you insists you're something you're not, and you have limited options for escape or defense. The cruelest part of projection is that your genuine qualities can be weaponized. If you're actually strong, they project weakness and call you fragile. If you're actually generous, they project selfishness and call you taker. They take what's real about you and invert it through their projection, so you're not just being misunderstood. You're being accused of being the opposite of what you actually are. You cannot fix someone else's projection. You can't love them into seeing clearly. You can't be good enough or clear enough or patient enough to make them stop. Because the projection isn't about you. It was never about you. It's about what they can't face in themselves. Your only job is to not take it on, to know yourself well enough that someone else's distorted perception doesn't become your reality, to hold your boundaries, to protect your sense of self from someone else's unconscious defense mechanism. And sometimes your only job is to walk away. Projection says more about the projector than it ever says about you. Their certainty about your flaws is actually certainty about their own disowned traits. Their conviction about your motives is actually conviction about motives they can't acknowledge having. You're not their emotional dumping ground. You're not the repository for everything they can't accept about themselves. You're not responsible for carrying their shadow so they can maintain their self-image. Let them have their projection. You don't have to accept delivery.